Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our panel this afternoon, Diverse Minds, Stronger Cyber, Building Inclusive Workforces that Thrive. I have to say, I think in a fast-changing digital world, diversity isn't an ideal, it's an essential. You've heard in an earlier panel session, I hear chaired fantastically by Jane, from our future workforce. I think now is the time to hear from a panel of cybersecurity leaders with decades of experience between them who are going to share their insights into building an inclusive, resilient and innovative cyber sector. The UK's cyber workforce is approximately 143,000 professionals, yet almost half of organisations report skill shortages. Representation remains uneven. 17% women, disabled professionals 8%, and while 19% are from ethnic minority backgrounds, only 8% hold senior roles. The panel will explore strategies that have shaped careers in this dynamic industry, from empowering underrepresented talents to fostering environments where confidence can thrive. They'll share honest reflections on their journeys, challenges and the interventions needed to create and retain a truly diverse cyber workforce. I hope that whether you're starting out or leading, this conversation will inspire you to champion inclusion and support the perspectives that make cybersecurity stronger. We're going to have Slido running throughout the session, so please feel free to put questions into Slido. If we have time at the end, and we might have such a good conversation we don't, we'll come to those questions at the end, but the code is as usual. So I'm going to ask the panel to multitask as a challenge to start with. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, so talk a bit about their name and their role, and a little bit about their route into cyber. And interestingly, Purvi and I have just been talking about we have a common route into cyber which we didn't know. And was there a pivotal person, program, or intervention that shaped your career trajectory? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Why does diversity matter in cyber? And from your perspective, what makes an inclusive workforce not just right, but mission critical to the resilience of the sector? And I will start with Purvi.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Purvi K. I'm currently head of cyber in Defence Prime. Didn't always start as a cybersecurity professional. Like Caroline, I am actually a qualified aerospace engineer who stumbled upon cyber. What was meant to be a 2-year secondment, I'm actually now in the 14th year of doing cybersecurity. Didn't go back to engineering, but now I've done a 360 and I'm doing cybersecurity in the aerospace domain. So I can just say I can keep my aerospace degree, it's come used to use now. But why does diversity matter? So throughout my 14 years in this cyber career, what I've noticed is in cyber, when it comes to decisions, you need the best decisions. When you're having an incident, you can't just say, oh, that will do. You've got to make the best decision at the time. And some of the best decisions that I've seen that have been made have been where there are different perspectives, there's different thinking. So if you think about our adversaries, they don't follow the same rules. They don't operate the same way. They themselves are so diverse in their thinking. So the people that we're bringing in to defend against these adversaries, they also need to be thinking differently. If they start thinking the same, that's where we get the blind spots, right? So for me, diversity is not just a nice to have, it's a strategic advantage. And if we want to stay ahead in the next decade, then here's something controversial. Diversity shouldn't be part of your strategy. It should be their strategy.
Thank you, Purvi. Can I move on to Richard, please?
Hi, my name is Richard Bates. Bear with me, I'm dying of a chest infection right now, so if I lose my voice. So I'm Chief Technology Officer for Goldlock. I've been in IT and cyber for most of my working career, more focused on cyber in the last 10 years or so, predominantly around critical infrastructure, operational technology, so I'm more on the legacy and old equipment side of the world. Just extending on the comment that you made there about, I'm always reminded of a speech that Ollie Whitehouse made several years ago about the battlefield that we're facing right now. Heavily asymmetric, they're reliant on us following the same routines, the same patterns, and they take advantage of that. And the need for the diverse mind is absolutely necessary, because we are facing that diverse threat landscape as well. Lots of different reasons for why people want to attack our infrastructure. It could be ideological, it could be political, religious, or any of those things. And so when you have all these different types of threats, we need people who can think a lot differently and recognize patterns and recognize the systems that are being attacked, so that we can stay ahead of them and curtail whatever they're attempting to do.
Thank you, Richard. Natalie, please.
Okay. Hello, I'm Natalie Billingham. I am responsible for Akamai's sales in EMEA, but I'm also the EMEA MD, so it means I have leadership oversight for all of our cyber business. And I actually probably am the accidental person in cyber, because Akamai actually started as we're one of the world's largest CDNs, but then we realized that our platform had very unique capabilities to defend against threats. And so then we became a cyber company, and guess what? That's now the largest part of our business. And what we've found is that, being part of that and being able to make an impact is incredibly rewarding. So I fell into cyber a little bit by accident, but it's such a crucial part of what we do. Another area of our business is really trying to bring in diverse voices. Actually, for all the reasons the other people on the panel have already said, we do believe when you're defending against threats, you need diverse thinking in order to defend against threats in the appropriate way. And so we really look out across the community to look at all types of voices and all types of experience, because we think that makes us better in able to defend. And we've seen plenty of examples of that in the way that we work. But the other area that I actually wanted to highlight with bringing diversity into cyber and diverse voices is it helps us fill the skills gap. I mean, you mentioned that 17% stat for women specifically. That is an absolute tragedy. Yes, and something that we need to change. So by bringing more diverse voices, we also open up the aperture and can bring more people in.
Thank you, Natalie. And Jane.
Hello everyone, Jane Wright, Senior Consultant at Kinetic and also a Research Engineer at the University of Strathclyde. And so much everyone else also tripped and fell, landed in cyber. Trained mathematician, got offered a number of internships whilst at university, one in a technology research, one in a security operations centre, and one for the National Statistics Office, and I was absolutely not touching that. I then joined the NCSC's Cyber First bursary programme, and the rest is history, as they say. And on the point on diversity, I'm really going to echo what everyone else is saying. My research is focused on resilience, and a lot of the resilience research comes down to what are your costs, and more importantly, what are your cultures, what are the social behaviours with in your organisation. We want voices that can put their hands up to senior leadership and question the way our systems are designed, developed, and be a little bit difficult, because that's what we need. The attackers are not going to say, hang on, is that all right with you? They're just going to go ahead with what they think. So that's why diversity really is mission critical.
Thank you. So I'm now going to sort of dig a bit deeper into career pathways and your lived experience. And I was going to start with Purvi. So what misconceptions about entering in or progressing in cyber do you most want to challenge? And was there a pivotal person, program, intervention, or anything else that shaped your career trajectory? And what made that support so effective?
Sure. So I think most of us would have heard around for early careers or those who are trying to enter into cyber. Some of the misconceptions for them are, cyber is a very technical subject, and we find that with girls in doing STEM subjects or trying to encourage them to do STEM, and when they're thinking about cyber, they say, well, I'm not technical, and I won't be able to do this. And we find that with women trying to come into cyber as well, but not just women, many others as well, just that it's technical. Well, it's not, right? We have the whole GRC space. We have people who need to develop policies. We need people to understand geopolitics analytics. We need people to be able to communicate. Some of the greatest minds are those that have been able to translate complexity into actionable objectives and bring that clarity at board level or at management level. They're not technical. They have that skill set, and that is one of the misconceptions. I think one of the other that's when you come in. The others is that the cyber is a department for no. So when people are trying to enter into cyber, it's like, well, I don't want to work in an area where I'm going to have to fight to make my way or have any progress. And this is where things are changing, right? We're trying to make cyber an enabler for everything we do. People are recognizing why thinking about security from the forefront is so important now. So pivoting that mindset around cyber is not the department for no, it's actually going to help you innovate and grow in the way you want to. And for me personally, what's helped, not a particular program or so, but I would say early on in my career it was definitely mentorship. Not one, but many. I had about 2 or 3 mentors at the same time. I mean, why not, right? You want diverse opinions. I had male mentors, female mentors, some in industry, some in government when I worked in government. So I had all different perspectives, and I took everyone's advice. And here's the thing about mentorship. They're not there to tell you exactly what to do. They're just there to guide you. Ultimately, the decision is yours. So why not have all the wise people that you look up to giving you that guidance, and then you take the best of it, right? So that helped me earlier on. Now, when I'm in leadership positions, what's helping me is opportunities and sponsorship. So people making me visible, people believing in me when I don't, people giving me opportunities when I don't feel I'm ready for it. That sort of sponsorship is really helping with progress, opening doors for me, talking about me when I'm not even in the room. Sometimes bad, but most of the times hopefully recommending me. But things like that really go a long way. The things that happen behind the scenes is actually where things happen. And I think for individuals, I would say, it's not always there. Not all organizations have that, or maybe I was lucky with the people that I chose. It's not always there that you have a seat at the table. And for you, I would say, take your own seat to the table. You wouldn't. Not everybody will get a great mentor or sponsor. Go find one. Go make your own space. And for organizations, I would say maybe we should start considering when we're going to stop hiring for just confidence and start hiring for potential and attitude. Look at what this person may be able to do, not just now, but in maybe 2 or 3 years, if you help them and nurture them in the right way. Let's start hiring for that.
Thank you. Richard, you mentioned a pivotal person in your introduction. Did you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so from personal experience, I spent a lot of my career not really understanding myself, not understanding why I really fitted in with the environment. And it wasn't until I met my now business partner and co-founder that gave me that opportunity to really demonstrate what I'm capable of. I always struggle to articulate myself. I'm not the most confident speaker, but what Stephen was able to do was he was able to see the output and the results that I was able to do. And whilst it took time for him to really understand, he gave me that bandwidth. He was almost like, I don't understand you yet, but I can see what you can do. And he gave me that bandwidth and that freedom and that space to be able to really show what I was capable of. And that's something I've always taken into my own hires as well, the people that I bring on. Very much they might struggle to be able to explain something or be able to articulate themselves in the right way. And it's the most frustrating thing for them because you can, like with anything, if you're not able to express yourself, you don't really feel that you've put across how you truly feel about it. And it's very frustrating. So giving people that ability to be able to do that and do that in a way that their results show for themselves is such a powerful thing.
Thank you. So moving again, I think back to Purvi for first thoughts on this, and I think we're going to come to you, Jane, because it's very relevant to your session. So what barriers did you have to navigate that are still present for new entrants today? and what can organisations do to dismantle them? So some thoughts from Purvi and then from Jane, please.
It's from me first. Sorry.
Yes.
The barriers, again, I think entry level, it's people not understanding what the holistic nature of cyber and not understanding what different things they can do. So there's that lack of awareness. The other barriers, I would say, is the cliche thing around job descriptions saying, 5 years experience for entry level. I feel like organizations know this, but still, why do they put that out there? And for those who are in positions and maybe mid-career, senior managers, I think it's the lack of transparency of progressive roles. Not all jobs in organizations are advertised. Sometimes the decisions about who's going to get the job is already made in a room you're not at. So I think that inequality of opportunity are some of the barriers there. And we also talk about, we mentioned the cyber skills gap, and everybody just says, we just don't have the right people. There's that, a misconception around that, I think. My personal view is there is no cyber skills gap. It's a gap around perspective. It's how we're seeing that skills gap. There are people out there with the right skill set, right talent. We're just not attracting them in the right way and then bringing them in and not nurturing them in the right way. And at that point, I must shout out to Jane, who earlier expertly led a panel on the future workforce with Alex, Jack, Thomas, and Anna.
Well done.
Very young and entry-level individuals, super sharp, so passionate. Honestly, I was emotional. They were talking about, and they were very spot on, they were talking about the barriers they've overcome and they're feeling now. And we had Jack, who is an intern, still in uni, looking for a job, struggling to find a job. And then you're talking about skills gap now. I'm thinking there is no skills gap. There are people there. We talked about, Jack, well, what trouble do you have finding a job in Scotland? And he can't see many jobs being advertised, and and he said himself, there may be jobs there, but I can't see any. I can't see any that fits what I want to do. So people are out there that want these jobs, and some people are out there who can do these jobs, but they don't fit into the norm. We have neurodivergents who are absolutely brilliant and will be brilliant at AI and cybersecurity, but they don't fit the mold, the office worker mold, it's all those sort of stuff. So I don't think there's the barrier around, there's a skills gap. No, there isn't there. I think for organizations is also, they need to stop thinking about there's a talent pipeline issue. It isn't. For me, it is an organizational, systemic, cultural issue. Change the mindsets at the top, and then you'll start seeing that talent flowing in.
Yeah. Jane, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Purvi summed it up excellently, and Richard, you also touched upon it. Like, giving people the space to have the confidence. We challenged industry in our earlier session to say, why don't you change the way you do recruitment? Yes, okay, you might want the types of personalities that will apply through the traditional CV route, but actually there are some people that are better. Just give them a question, or separately, don't give them any questions. Let them come to you. Just give them 20 minutes to talk and see what you can learn. And I think that's really important. People that are confident, like myself, I'll stand up and I'll say, I have an opinion and I would like people to hear it, and I'll keep talking until somebody listens. But there are people that are not like that find it really difficult to speak up because they don't feel like they've got the experience. And there's the great saying, the more you learn, the more you realise you don't know, and that can really put people off from bringing their opinion to the table. So I suppose for me, that's what I see and hear in my peer group as the biggest barrier. And then those experiences and things that they're learning, having come up using technology, they're in a different generation. We can't appreciate what they know and vice versa. So it's how can we create a psychologically safe space to encourage people to ask the difficult questions. And they want to learn. It's not about blaming each other. It's saying, how can we all help each other think a little bit differently. And one of the things you were asking was, maybe how can we do this differently? This idea of mentoring, what about reverse mentoring? Can you go and find a young person and say, actually, I'd really like to understand your opinions, your perspective, your experience using the technologies, using the system, and you can maybe impart some of that confidence and softer skills that we want to see in those people coming up.
Thank you. And I'm going to take one of the questions off Slido because I think it's really directly related to this and come to you, Jane. It's most of the panel mentioned they accidentally came to cyber. How do we change that to be more active decision at school and college age?
I would maybe question back and say, don't we want it to be accidental? I mean, for me personally, I actually applied to go to medical school and I thought I want to save people, change the world, and that's why I brought it up in my earlier session. There are quite a few people that think like that. Like, yes, we want people to go and study cybersecurity and ethical hacking, but through the Cyber First programme, we've had people studying politics, economics, history, and that's a completely different style of learning. So actually, the more people that accidentally fall into cyber, the more people we've got doing cyber, then great. So we need both.
Thank you.
And I'd love to comment on that one if
Yes, yes,
possible,
please,
because
yeah.
I do think it also involves, because I agree with what you say, a lot of people, it's good that it's accidental, but I also think a lot of people coming through the schooling system, they're not necessarily thinking about cyber. And so I do think there's a lot that all of us in the community can do to work with the schools. We've done things actually with Dr. Claire Johnson, with the schools, and we had all these year 10 girls and they did a capture the flag and it was absolutely incredible. We've done things at Akamai where we run days in the community and the young kids coming in, at the beginning we say to them, how many of you would like a career in cyber? And I'm not joking, it's like tumbleweed. But we run all these exercises, we try and gamify it, make it fun, do all these different things, and at the end, maybe it's for our egos, but we say, oh, how many of you would like a career in cyber now? And all these hands shoot up. So I do think there's things that we can all do through the schooling system, through university, to just, show how interesting and how fun this community can be to be part of, and then people want to be in it.
Yeah, fabulous. And I can stay with you, actually, Natalie, for the next question, which is about what are the biggest mid-career challenges in cyber and what practical strategies help people navigate and keep them progressing? I think we actually have a similar question about, from this Slido, is, keeping diverse talent through the pipeline.
Yeah, and we've just published a study, actually, which is called the Mid-Career Exodus at Akamai. And actually, the findings were pretty stark, because it actually found that 87% of women who come into the tech sector leave within 10 years, which is just, when you think again about that skills gap, it's quite shocking. And the reasons they cite are things like the stress, the incident-based stress, the isolation that you can have within the industry, which is going on, and also the lack of role models that they see. They don't see people like them, so they don't feel that they belong. And so we need to look at practical ways that we can solve that. And I think there are a number of activities that we can all do that really will make a difference to that. Because 87% coming off of 17%, you're sort of thinking, well, where does this all end? So there's a lot to be done.
So, it's quite depressing, really, isn't it? When you think
I didn't mean to depress anyone at the end of the conference.
But it is something I think we observe when we look at Cyber First. We see the massive enthusiasm with the Cyber First Girls competition. Then Cyber First bursary, slightly fewer. Graduation into STEM jobs, slightly fewer. And then the same sort of tail off of people. So it's things that we observe. So I'm going to move the conversation on to sort of empowering underrepresented talent. So how do we empower people who are not the majority? And I was going to ask you, Richard, have you thought about what inclusion interventions really do move the needle, and on what looks good on paper but doesn't really deliver real impact?
There's a phrase that always comes to my mind, and it's on the lines of, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid. And when we're building interventions by building trees and having a tree climbing competition and patting ourselves on the back for the results, we're really missing the opportunity there. So there's a few things I think relatively small, but can have the biggest impact. Hiring process is quite nerving for someone who's neurodivergent, and a lot of the benchmarking is: do you fit in with the culture? Do you, what's your social capability? And all the benchmarking really on that is your ability to mimic, or your ability to mirror the way someone's talking, or whatever it might be. And you're missing that opportunity to see what they're actually capable of. So changing the way that works, not focusing on cultural fit in or anything like that, and focusing more on capability, will have a significant impact. We've been talking about the lack of, lack of talent in the pipeline. I think we're just benchmarking the wrong things, ultimately. And other parts, very little procedural things that we can make changes with. For example, providing notes ahead of a meeting. You wouldn't believe how useful that is, especially when someone might be overthinking or worried about what that meeting will be, how much they need to prepare. Having something as simple as just having an agenda prepared ahead of time really does help. And matching, sorry, throat's dying. Matching skills, the talents with problems as well. If they're a systems thinker, put them in systems level things. If they're a hyper-focused individual, look at maybe like forensic level things, pattern recognition. There's lots that could be done there. So it's really identifying what their capabilities are and matching them with the right role, rather than trying to force them into a role that they're just naturally not fit for.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything on that?
I might add something around inclusion, if I may. I think people look at it as a policy, inclusion policy, and you mentioned about on paper versus in reality. I think that's the problem. We shouldn't look at inclusion as a policy, but we should think about how are we behaving when it matters the most. So if you picture this incident has happened, we're in a meeting, and the most junior person in that meeting challenges a decision, and they're listened to. Every single person in that room, it has brought their authentic, real self in that crisis mode, whether they're panicking or whether they're calm, but they're deemed credible. We are asking questions like, what have we not thought about, although we're in crisis mode? So imagine a scenario like that where every opinion is included and catered for. That is true inclusion, because that is when it matters most, when we're firefighting, when we're incident managing and things like that, not when everything is calm and nice, because it's easy to do that. But for that to happen, I think there's a few things that we need, right? For example, I don't want to have a team that says, yes, boss, all the time. I mean, why have I hired you then? I'm hiring you because the things you can do better than I can. So I want you to challenge me on it and say, okay idea, however, we can do it better this way, right? And that's where the leaders need to accept that it's okay for your team to challenge. It's okay for everyone in your team to challenge. We need to be able to have that environment for them to do that, though. And for me, a very inclusive environment is one where there's clear expectations, two, where there is absolute psychological safety for people to challenge without any judgment, and three, where leaders are actually listening more than they're speaking and are taking action.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the term psychological safety is bandied around a lot, but to actually truly have a psychologically safe environment is really, really quite challenging. So all the things you've suggested really, really important. In moving on to culture, which we've already psychologically safe environments talked about. So I was going to come to you, Natalie. Culture's often shaped by everyday behaviours. So what do you think an inclusive culture actually looks like in practice in a really high-pressure cyber environment, as you would have at Akamai?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the high pressure piece is really important, because I think in pressure you often see the best of people, but you also see the worst of people. So you kind of need to find a way, when we talk about psychological safety, for people to actually be able to, bring their behaviours in an appropriate way, bring their problem-solving skills. And I do think that starts from, you mentioned leadership starting at the top and the cultural coming down. It has to start there, that you're making space for everybody to, bring their skills, bring their ideas. And I do agree with exactly what Purvi said actually in the last answer about conflict. It's one of the 5 dysfunctions of a team is the absence of conflict. So I think if you create that culture where it's the norm, in those high pressure situations, your team are going to feel confident to say, I think maybe the path we're taking is the wrong one. I think maybe we could look at it differently. Hey, here's another idea. And so we have to build that into our everyday behaviors, because then when we are in that high pressure situation, all those things are learned behaviors, they're learned muscles. And the other piece, there's a Simon Sinek thing, and he says that culture is values plus behavior. So it's not just the behaviors that we think about. We need to think about the values that we sort of instill in our everyday organization. And I think if we can get those 2 pieces right and live them every day, by the time it gets to the high pressure part, actually, it's kind of business as usual, probably with a bit less sleep and a bit more stress, but it means that, we'll execute flawlessly because it's just the way that we do things.
Yeah. Purvi, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, yeah, totally echo everything there. And we talked about that environment that we need to create that absolutely forms part of the culture that Natalie's just said.
Fabulous. So I was going to now move on to, we've kind of talked about some of the challenges, some of the solutions, some of the things that people might do to help. I was going to sort of build on the session that Jane had earlier, lessons from the sort of future workforce. So what's our aiming point? What would a truly inclusive workforce look like in, 2030? And what do you think we need to get there from your research work?
Yeah, a lot of what has already been said is really what we need to do. We need to get different people in that challenge our own ideals of how we think about things. A lot of what goes on in the resilience research is, well, how well do we understand our system? And people are part of our system. Going back to your point on the values of the organisation, like how many people in your organisation are actually bought into what the company is trying to achieve? How on side are they going to be in a crisis situation? How well is that message spread down from the top? So I do think there's a lot more to be done there. And although we've mentioned the inclusivity, I want to just pull out something else, is we need to get better at celebrating failure. So often we see in these high crisis situations, we often look for somebody to blame, and you see on the news that CISO X has been fired because things didn't go quite to plan. And yes, there is a case for making sure that we're accountable and not being negligent, but actually after a crisis situation, they have learnt the most out of every individual. They know the lessons, and by no means is that going to happen on their watch again. So how can we encourage people to make mistakes, fail fast, but then learn from them and building them up to do that?
Thank you. Before we move on to the Slido questions, I've got a final one-sentence answer from each of you in turn. So for anybody in the audience, whether they're senior leaders, whether they're just starting out, whether they're leading a team, whatever, what's one practical action they can take this week to champion inclusion and support diverse talent? And I'll start with Purvi, please.
I would say find somebody that doesn't look like you or speak like you and give them an opportunity, whether it's mentoring or just giving them your time or sponsorship or connecting them with people. But find somebody that's not like you.
Thank you. Richard?
Almost similar, really. It's when you get back to the office, look for someone who's been asked to climb a tree when they're really built for swimming, and find them some water.
Yeah.
I think it's going to sound a bit trite, but I was given some advice earlier in my career, and I use it all the time. It's about how much you listen And so, it was like 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that ratio. And I do think if you listen to the different people in your teams, it doesn't really matter what your role is, where you are in the organization, if you really actively listen in the conversations, you're surprised at what you pick up, what you learn, and how you deploy that. And I do think that listening is, as much as talking, is really what helps create inclusivity, because you just learn so much that your behaviors evolve. So yeah, listening for me.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not going to say anything new. I would just certainly say go and find someone that you've never met, never talked to before, and maybe ask them the 5 whys. Why do you do what you do? Why is your program working the way it is? And just see how far you can learn from them on that.
Thank you. So I've now got quite a lot of Slido questions, so we'll have a look at some of them and see how we get on. And I'm going to come to Richard for the first one. And I think it builds on some of the things he was saying earlier. He was talking about how do we support, and the question is, how do we support and foster neurodivergent members of our teams? So you've talked about the recognising their different talents. Is there any more that you'd like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm just extending on that point about just giving people the space and the breadth to be able to do what they do well and to be able to show what they're capable of. Some of the things that we've done internally is, like, for example, someone who might not be able to express themselves well or put it in a structured way, giving them access to AI tools. Because, I mean, I use it myself. I'm riddled with ADHD, and quite often I'm brain dumping things, and I just need a way to be able to structure it nicely and so that others can kind of understand whatever's going on in there. And providing the tools and the space really is there for it, but also, it was mentioned before as well, creating a space where there's no repercussions for comments. Mm-hmm. Sometimes someone might be a little bit too blunt, or maybe it's just their communication style. I actively encourage people to call me out on my nonsense. I come up with some rubbish ideas half the time, most of the time. And just allowing them to push back on that, I think, is very important, because it then empowers them. It helps them to feel like they are actively contributing and adding value into it, but it also then teaches them how to then work with their future hires when they progress through the company.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add a practical example in action there, because as an MD, I created an ID&E board, and this board it's inclusion, diversity and engagement, obviously, and it's to look at all the different things that matter to our team, all different things. It doesn't really matter. They do things like culture armor, which is all to do with like manga, but all the way through to neurodiversity. And so they decided to run a series around neurodiversity. They ran a series of webinars. We brought in external speakers for that, and they were incredibly well received, whether they're people who were neurodiverse in our teams or they had family members. And then it was so well received that actually we ran a kind of extension, and the leader of this board went out to the community and went, would anyone like to speak about our experiences? And because the neurodiverse members of our team felt so comfortable that this was a topic that was, really something in our company that they could talk about, we had a number of people who wanted to come forward. And so now we've run a series of webinars run by the team, run by the neurodiverse members, talking about themselves and their skills and what they bring and why that adds value in their role. And so it's really sort of cascaded from education through to the safety for them to feel like, hey, I fit here and what I do really adds value. And so, yeah, it's really been interesting.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next one. I'll start with Jane, and then obviously others can chip in. Are businesses doing enough to support grassroots level work from the likes of third sector organisations to ensure that minority groups are getting the support needed to get positive destinations before cyber careers and educations are even considered? Is there enough cross-sector work going on?
It's a good question. I do think there needs to be more cross-sector looking, cyber and what is typically what I ask people. I do think there are a number of excellent organisations doing a lot of good work. Like, I actually taught for Codeverse Girls, and they put a lot of emphasis not just on graduates coming through school, but looking at that mid-career space and helping those in their junior career go to the mid-career, mums returning to work, they really put emphasis on that, and then your ethnic minorities as well. So it's how do we help them maybe advertise themselves better and break into new spaces, and how can organisations use the good material that's already out there in their work.
Okay. Anybody like to add any more to that?
I think on the minority piece, specifically, or ethnic minorities, I do think there's a lot around, trying to have that visible leadership for people who are minorities. And again, we do stuff, actually, that charity I talked about, where the people sit with their arms down at the beginning and have their hands up. Yes, we want to be in cyber at the end. That's actually, it's a youth charity called Corey. It's for underrepresented youths. And we always try and, make sure that they see as much of the diversity of our team in that, so that they see people like me fit here, people like me can be here. And I think that's something, whatever your particular strengths or skills or what you bring to the industry in, trying to represent that within the community so that people feel like they fit and can be part of it is very important.
Thank you. And I'm going to move on to the next question. I'll probably start with you, Natalie, because I think you've done quite a lot of studies on this sort of thing. So what quality metrics would you suggest a large organisation use to effectively measure diversity?
Oh, well, I mean, it does depend a little bit within the organisation. We use a lot of engagement scores, and we run a lot of different metrics because we are ultimately an American organisation, looking at the diversity of our teams, how that moves over time, what the factors can be, and we try and knit the metrics together, because I think if you're just looking at diversity as a sort of very simplistic metric, you're not really getting the granular understanding of what are the things that we need to change in order to change the metric. So we sort of start with a high-level measurement, be it, diverse representation, ethnic minorities, etc. We also do veterans, actually, but and then we look at, okay, what do we want to accomplish, and then we try and measure the specific activities within an action plan, KPIs, on, okay, our path to change that is this. What are the ways that we measure it? So you sort of start high level, create some KPIs, and then you create measurements across those over time so that you can ensure that you're either achieving the outcome that you want, or you can course correct as needs be, because, it's nice to think you set a goal and you always achieve it, but often it's a bit more of a wiggly line. And so that's, one way of doing it.
Thank you. Anybody would like to come in on that? No? Well, I'll move on to the next one. I've got loads. So I think, Purvi, I was going to come to you on this. A diversity of demographics can help break groupthink, but how do we ensure a true diversity of thinking and perspective?
I think just look at what's happening in your team, and as Natalie said, focus on outcomes. And this is where the metrics thing for me sometimes is concerning, because if we're just going to have quotas and numbers, then we're losing the whole point of this. Look at the outcomes. Is your team delivering innovative ideas, different ideas every time? Are they coming up with fantastic ways of problem solving, or are they doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to succeed? So I think focusing on outcomes rather than do we have enough diversity in the team, number-wise, is something I would say is a way to encourage that. But and the other thing is just do it. Don't talk about it. Just do it. The leaders, if you want to show that your organization is diverse, show it. Don't put it in your website or anything. Just show that it is, I think.
Would anybody like to add anything else to that?
I mean, the only thing I'd say regarding the groupthink point specifically is, to that point of sort of building the muscle and the practices, I do think you can build practices in the way that you operate to counter groupthink. So, as we all rush towards consensus at the end of someone's good idea, really building in the practice of saying, okay, let's look at the opposite. Let's really make it a practice to examine it from an alternate perspective. And then it's not, oh, well, you're being the one who's going against the group. It's like, that's how we want to explore all of the perspectives, and I think that then gives you a broader and more diverse pool of thinking to extract whatever you need to from.
Yeah,
Just to add something on that, I think that's the thing that's missing. Like, there is a trade-off between getting numerical metrics, and we do need to question things, but it's how do we capture that feedback loop, and how often are we asking ourselves, are these the right metrics? How often do you change the metrics you operate at? Yes, we want to see trends over time, but are those trends giving the right outcomes? And I would really encourage organisations to think, well, what are the questions, what are the outcomes, and how are we constantly feeding that back into our business process?
Thank you. Thanks. I think the next one, I'm going to ask you all for some thoughts because it's quite a wide question. Do you think the diversity challenge is unique to cyber, or are there lessons to be learnt from elsewhere? And I'll start with Jane, just to shake it up a bit.
One of the biggest things I see, it's not sector specific. Like, I met someone on holiday once, and she worked in literature, and she said they have the exact but opposite problem. They're trying to think, how do we get more men studying English and bringing that into journalism? So you're going to face the same thing in other sectors, and people are always going to find the role that they feel most suited to. So maybe there are people that are more intrinsically inclined to doing the deep technical work, and there will be people that prefer the strategy and policy, but it's how can we maybe combine sectors and have cyber and whatever else you want to do.
Natalie, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's just in cyber. I do think it's sort of pervasive across different industries, and I do think that some of the practices that other industries need to take up are the same thing, and I know that because I didn't start in cyber, so in other industries it was exactly the same thing. There aren't a lot of women, there aren't a lot of minorities, and actually in some ways cyber is good at encouraging that STEM mindset. Certainly we see a lot of more certainly in our organisation of neurodiverse individuals, which we want and we encourage because we can see the benefits. So actually sometimes in cyber we see those benefits more clearly than in other industries where actually they should be a little bit more open-minded.
Okay, Richard, have you any thoughts to add?
Not really, no. I think it's we see it's quite a universal challenge across most industries. I'm more biased towards sort of engineering and IT, and it's whichever industry I've worked in, I see the same challenges. It's certainly a challenge across all sectors, I guess.
Thank you. And Purvi, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, and I'd add to that. Well, that says a lot, doesn't it? That this is not about the field you're in, or anything technical. Or anything. It is a cultural problem across. It's a societal problem. It's a mindset problem. So we need to tackle it from that, which is a root cause. I mean, if you look at medical health research, there are statistics that show that men's health is more research than women's health, and so women now are struggling with certain things because there's not a lot of research around how they can help with those sort of conditions they have. So it is societal, and just how we're evolving as humans, but it does need to change.
Okay. And I'm going to go to the final question, and I'm going to go to everybody, and I think this is a really tough one. It's
go to Jane first.
Start in the middle. I think it certainly applies to lots of people. It applies to me as well. A lot of people find it really hard to speak up in situations and organisations. So the question is, what advice would you give to somebody who has, the question is disability or is not neurodivergent, but I'd like to widen it to who has a difference of any sort, who is shy about speaking up and admitting that they're struggling because the embarrassment and stigma, and what advice would you give to them? Shall I start with Purvi?
Right. Okay, this one I'm happy with. This is actually not a difficult question for me because a lot of confident people will say, "Oh, just say it, just tell them because then they can help you." I'm not neurodivergent, but I have many colleagues who are, and it is an absolute challenge to go out there and say I'm neurodivergent. There's somebody nodding. It's not easy. If you're not neurodivergent, you wouldn't understand it. And I still don't get it because I'm like, but just go and speak up, right? But I've worked with them so much that now I get them. I understand why it's so difficult. The stigma. It's not this is not their problem, it's the stigma problem, the organizational problem, how they're going to be perceived. So it's not for them to build that confidence to go and speak up. It's for the listeners, the organization, to change their mindset and stop judging people. The whole thing, for example, in some organizations where you have the employee resource groups, neurodiversity has been put in the disability bucket. And for that own reason, people don't want to say they're neurodiverse because some don't consider themselves as disabled, and it's not a disability. Some of them, it's an absolute talent, a superpower. So they don't want to be labeled disabled. So simple things like that, labeling people, don't label them. And for me, it's not talking about I am neurodivergent, but when you onboard somebody, don't you not have a conversation with them and say, right, how do you operate? How do you work? Do you like tasking via email or do you like verbally? If I was to quickly ping your team's message randomly, does that bother you? Do you need a step-by-step guide, or can I just generically, you do that with everybody, whether they're neurodivergent or not. So why do we have to put that label? And just simple initial conversations like that really help. It helps build that psychological safety, that the questions my line manager is asking me is actually helping me with my neurodivergency in terms of how I work, how I operate, and it's making life easier for me at work. Maybe, just maybe, if I do now go and speak to him or her and say, I've got ADHD or autism, or I struggle with understanding this or this, just maybe they will understand me, and then we will have a better way of working together. But you need to sort of come forward first as line manager, open up and build the environment for them to then speak up. So I'm not going to give you the advice of if you're shy or if you're neurodivergent, just speak up. No, don't, because it's difficult. Mm-hmm. Just take your time with it. And I would say for line managers too, if you think somebody in your team is neurodivergent, ask them the questions you would ask anybody. Don't label them, just have a better working relationship as you would with anybody.
Thank you. Richard, have you got anything to add to that?
It's something I'm still figuring out myself.
Yeah.
It's tough. It is really tough because you've probably spent a lot of your life not fitting in, not being understood. And so we develop this idea of things are a lot worse than they actually are. Sometimes just saying it is all that's needed, rather than allowing it to stew in your head. I suffer from that terribly, and it's something I have to constantly work on. But also find someone else as well that thinks like you. I've got a friend here, Wayne, very similar minded to me, very similar struggles, and we're able to just, is this normal? We're just able to kind of brain dump and just figure out each other's problems because we kind of understand each other. So always find a peer or someone who may think very similar to you and really help them in the same way that they can help you as well. It's incredibly important, but it also kind of just comes back to that point. Never as bad as you think it is in your head. So always speak up where you can. It's difficult, but try your hardest.
Thank you very much. Natalie?
I totally agree with that. It's often never as bad as you think it's going to be, but the sort of dread of having to start that first step is always, extremely hard. Like, I'll speak up, what's going to happen, all the scenario planning that goes on in your mind is horrible. So I would say, in terms of practical ways, just, start small. So yes, maybe you do find a peer or someone you're comfortable with and, make a little path, a little plan, like today I'm going to try this and I'm going to speak up about that. And you know what? You'll probably find it goes fine. And then try another thing. Well, now I'm going to try it in this small group where I'm relatively comfortable. And then over time, you'll sort of see that a lot of those things that you were concerned about, they may not occur. Hey, maybe they will, but do you know what? Most people don't remember half conversations. I don't even remember what happened yesterday. So, I just think if you take a very sort of meticulous approach to, I'm going to try this, I'll speak up here, I'll speak up in this group, you'll begin to see that maybe, some of those things that you feared weren't necessary, and you know, whilst the things you have to say are interesting and important. That's the thing. I think there's a fear of, I'm not interesting enough and what I have to say doesn't have value. I bet it does. So just, you know, start small and keep trying.
Thank you. And Jane?
Yes, I don't know if I've got anything new to add. I do think leadership needs to find different ways to communicate. I do think we should try it in safe spaces. For me personally, my safe space wasn't even at my organisation. I used to phone up and be like, oh, are my feelings valid? Is this what happens? And just having that mentorship and bringing it back in and finding people I was comfortable was how I approached it. So yeah, echo the thoughts of everyone else.
Yeah, so can you all join me? We had a fantastic panel. Thank you all for your openness, honesty, and sharing all your insights. So can you join me in thanking the panel?
Thank you.